How small does a joke have to be to end a life you built together? One throwaway line about Fletcher stopping by, and I came home to a new lock and an envelope from Gabriel's lawyer. My name is Cordelia Baptiste, and I'm 32 years old. I work as an administrative assistant at a marketing firm downtown, handling schedules and client communications. Until 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect setup with Gabriel Santos, my partner of 4 years. He's a software developer who works long hours and makes good money, which allowed us to live comfortably in a modern downtown apartment that he'd leased before we moved in together. People want to paint me as the villain in this story, but they don't understand the full picture. Gabriel was emotionally distant and completely absorbed in his programming work. He'd come home, eat dinner while staring at his laptop, and spend evenings either coding or playing video games with his online friends. I felt like I was living with a roommate who occasionally shared my bed, not a real partner who cared about my emotional needs. Fletcher Monroe was my boyfriend for 3 years before I met Gabriel. When we broke up, we managed to stay friends because we genuinely cared about each other, even if the romantic part didn't work out. Fletcher is a musician trying to make it in the local scene, and he understood the creative struggles I dealt with at my marketing job. Unlike Gabriel, Fletcher actually listened when I talked about my dreams and frustrations. When my father passed away 2 years ago, Fletcher was the one who held me while I cried and helped me through the darkest period of my life. Gabriel was supportive in his practical way, handling funeral arrangements and taking care of bills, but he couldn't provide the emotional connection I desperately needed. Fletcher understood my grief because he'd lost his own father young. That shared experience created a bond between us that Gabriel never seemed to appreciate or understand. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone or destroy my relationship with Gabriel. I was simply maintaining a friendship that had become essential to my emotional well-being. Fletcher needed support too, struggling with unemployment and housing instability while pursuing his music career. When he started visiting our apartment during the day while Gabriel worked, it felt natural and harmless. We'd talk about life, share memories, and sometimes Fletcher would play guitar while I worked from home. Gabriel began questioning these visits, acting suspicious and jealous in ways that made me feel like a prisoner in my own home. He'd ask detailed questions about what Fletcher and I discussed, how long he stayed, and why these visits always happened when Gabriel was away. His paranoia was suffocating, and I started to resent being treated like I couldn't be trusted to maintain appropriate friendships. What nobody wants to acknowledge is that Gabriel pushed me toward Fletcher by being emotionally unavailable and controlling. If he'd been a better partner, if he'd shown genuine interest in my inner life and emotional needs, I never would have needed to seek that connection elsewhere. But Gabriel was comfortable with our routine and never bothered to grow or change, expecting me to be satisfied with his steady paycheck and reliable presence. The truth is, I thought I was being mature and honest about maintaining important relationships from my past. I never intended for things to become complicated, but when someone shows you the attention and understanding you've been craving, it's natural to respond to that connection. I was trying to balance my commitment to Gabriel with my need for emotional fulfillment, and I thought I was handling everything responsibly. Everything felt so normal and comfortable in our shared apartment at the beginning, like we had this perfect little setup that worked for everyone. Gabriel would come home from his long days as a software developer, looking tired but steady as always, and there were times when he'd walk in to find Fletcher already there, sitting casually at our kitchen table with his guitar case leaning against the chair like it belonged. I was usually in the middle of preparing dinner, chopping vegetables or stirring something on the stove, trying to make the place feel warm and inviting after a busy day. One evening, Gabriel noticed this pattern more sharply and brought it up in his calm way, pointing out that Fletcher seemed to be dropping by more and more, especially on the days when he knew I'd be home alone because Gabriel was at the office. He didn't raise his voice or anything, he just stated it like a fact, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Right away, I jumped in to explain things, telling him how Fletcher was really struggling with his music career right now. Gigs falling through, inspiration drying up, that kind of thing. I said he needed emotional support from someone who got what it was like to chase creative dreams. And since we'd been close for so long, it made sense that person was me. Gabriel tried to suggest alternatives, like maybe Fletcher could lean on his own family or reach out to other friends who might understand his situation better. That suggestion stung a bit, and I felt my defenses go up. I told him he was coming across as jealous and possessive, which wasn't like him at all, or at least not the man I thought I married. To drive the point home, I reminded him that Fletcher had been my closest friend for years, way before Gabriel and I even started dating. I stressed how important trust is in a healthy relationship, and how we both needed space for our own friendships without constant questioning. Then I brought up my father, how he'd passed away 2 years ago and left this huge hole in my life. Fletcher had been there through all of it, listening to me cry, helping me sort through memories, just being a rock when I needed one. Our bond felt unbreakable because of that shared history, and I made sure Gabriel knew it. As soon as I mentioned my dad, Gabriel went quiet, his face softening, like he didn't want to push into that painful territory. I knew I was leaning on that grief to make him back off, and it worked every time. It shifted the focus away from what was really bothering him. From there, I turned the conversation around on him, asking why he felt so threatened by me having male friends in my life. I pointed out that I never grilled him about his female co-workers or the buddies he spent hours gaming with online. Why was it okay for him but not for me? It made him seem insecure, and I didn't hold back in saying so. Deep down, I was deflecting, painting him as the one with the issues, instead of addressing his valid points about boundaries. Gabriel's discomfort was clear. His shoulders tensed, and he avoided eye contact. But he didn't fight back. He just nodded and let it drop, like he always did to keep the peace. Fletcher, for his part, stayed out of it entirely, sitting there silently while I handled the defense. He didn't need to say a word. I had it covered. We sat down to eat, and the tension hung in the air, but I tried to lighten things up with small talk. That's when Fletcher casually mentioned how well he knew Gabriel's work schedule, which days he worked from home, which ones he headed to the office early. It came out so naturally, like it was no big deal, but I saw the way Gabriel's fork paused mid-air. In that moment, it dawned on him that these visits weren't random at all. They were timed perfectly for when he wouldn't be around. It was like a small crack appearing in our so-called perfect arrangement, hinting that things could unravel if we weren't careful. Looking back now, that was the first real warning sign that Gabriel's patience had limits, and my ways of justifying everything were starting to wear thin. But at the time, I brushed it off, convinced I could keep balancing it all without consequences. Things started to shift when we went to Rosa's house for the usual Sunday family dinner. I had always liked these gatherings because they made me feel part of Gabriel's world, with his mother cooking traditional dishes and everyone chatting around the big table. But that day, I decided to bring Fletcher along, explaining to everyone that his car had broken down and he needed a lift. I introduced him as my oldest friend, almost like family, and mentioned how much my late father had thought of him, treating him like another son. Rosa greeted him warmly enough, but I could tell she was puzzled about why he was joining what was supposed to be a private family event. As we sat down to eat, I took charge of the conversation, talking up Fletcher's skills as a musician and sharing details about his upcoming shows. I wanted everyone to see him in a positive light, so I described how he'd been crashing at our place now and then, because his living situation with roommates was falling apart. I made Gabriel sound like the kind and open-hearted husband who was fine with helping out a friend in need. Gabriel tried to set the record straight, saying he hadn't actually agreed to any overnight stays, but I cut him off before he could finish. Instead, I turned it around and told the family that Gabriel had been acting oddly jealous lately, picking at my friendships and trying to decide who I could see. I suggested his job stress was getting to him, making him see threats where there were none, and I even asked them for advice on how to handle his sudden insecurity about me having guy friends. It put him on the spot in front of his own relatives, and I knew it would make him hesitate to push back. Miguel, Gabriel's older brother who works as a lawyer, started asking more direct questions about how often Fletcher was around and what the setup really looked like. I brushed those off with light jokes about Gabriel's protective side, calling it cute but over the top, and insisting Fletcher was basically like a brother to me. I didn't want the mood to turn serious, so I kept things playful while steering away from the details. Looking back, I was using that family setting to make Gabriel look bad in public, leaning on my father's memory again to make Fletcher's presence seem justified and wholesome. I positioned myself as the one dealing with an unfair situation, hoping his family would side with me or at least stay neutral. Rosa shifted in her seat a lot, clearly not fully at ease with how things were unfolding. Miguel's eyes narrowed like he was piecing something together, and Gabriel just sat there, looking smaller and more embarrassed than I'd ever seen him in his own home. The tension peaked when Fletcher casually brought up how he'd helped me rearrange things in our bedroom during Gabriel's last business trip, mentioning little personal touches, like where we kept certain items. It felt innocent in the moment, but it crossed a line, sharing details about our private space that didn't belong at a family table. Right after dinner, Miguel pulled Gabriel aside for a private talk, and though I couldn't hear them, I later learned he was warning Gabriel that my behavior was sending up major warning signals and that he should start keeping track of everything. That whispered conversation was the turning point, where Gabriel began to see a way out of the confusion I'd created. At the time, I thought I'd smoothed things over, but really, I'd just planted more doubts in everyone's minds, including my own family's when word got back. It was all starting to build towards something I couldn't control anymore. My office at the marketing firm became another place where I tried to make sense of everything, especially during lunch breaks when I could step away from my desk as an administrative assistant. It was a busy environment with open cubicles and constant chatter, but I found quiet moments to talk with Sophia, my coworker, and closest friend there. She was always someone I could count on for advice, and after the family dinner, I needed to vent about Gabriel's behavior. I told her how Gabriel had been getting more controlling, embarrassing me in front of his relatives by acting suspicious of Fletcher without any real reason. I described it as him trying to cut me off from my support network, especially when I was still dealing with the loss of my father. Fletcher was my emotional anchor in all that, helping me feel less alone, while Gabriel seemed more focused on his own insecurities than on understanding my needs. I made it sound like Gabriel was the one creating problems out of nothing, hoping Sophia would back me up like she usually did. Sophia listened at first, nodding along, but then she started asking tougher questions. She wondered why Fletcher, who wasn't working steadily, had so much free time to hang out at our apartment during the day. She also pointed out that Gabriel didn't strike her as the overly possessive type from what she'd seen at company events, and maybe his worries came from a real place. That caught me off guard, and I quickly flipped it to say that Gabriel must have been influencing her somehow, making even my best friend question my side of things. Our conversation got interrupted when Fletcher showed up unannounced at the office, carrying coffee and some treats from my favorite bakery. He greeted me with a quick peck on the cheek, chatting easily about my schedule and what I liked in my drink, showing how well he knew my routines. Sophia watched the whole thing, and I could see her expression change, picking up on the close way we interacted, like there was more than just friendship in our gestures and laughs. Later, when we were alone, Sophia asked me straight out if something more was going on with Fletcher. I got defensive right away, feeling hurt that she'd accuse me of that. I told her she was letting Gabriel's paranoia rub off on her and betraying our friendship by not trusting my word. I insisted that Fletcher was just helping me feel alive again after feeling neglected in my marriage for so long, and that our connection was all about emotional support, nothing else. I turned the blame around, saying anyone doubting me was part of the problem, and used my ongoing grief as a reason why I needed him around. In truth, I was trying to keep Sophia on my side while pushing things further with Fletcher, but her doubts made me nervous. She seemed stuck between wanting to support me and feeling like something wasn't right. Fletcher acted like he owned the space, getting too comfortable in my work life, which only added to the tension. The real eye-opener came when Sophia figured out I'd been fibbing about staying late at the office. Instead of extra work, I'd been using that time to visit Fletcher at his place, slipping away for afternoons together. She confronted me about it privately, saying she'd cover for me only if I promised to stop whatever was happening and fix things with Gabriel. It put me in a tough spot, forcing me to decide between holding on to my marriage or keeping the excitement with Fletcher. At that moment, I chose to downplay it and assure her everything was fine, but deep down, I knew the lies were piling up, and Sophia's warning was a sign that my secrets might not stay hidden much longer. Looking back, that lunch break marked where my support started cracking, and I began to feel the weight of what I was doing. He came home early and found Fletcher in our hallway. I said Fletcher had felt sick and needed a place to rest. I added that I had watched him from the living room and kept things proper. Gabriel asked Fletcher to leave and asked me to stop the home visits. His voice was level, but the room felt different. I told him he was trying to control me. I said grief was still heavy and that Fletcher helped me carry it. I said a healthy partner would accept that support. Fletcher mumbled about meeting elsewhere and reached for his jacket. I waved that off and told Gabriel the real problem was his fear, not my choices. Gabriel did not shout. He picked up a folder from the console table and laid out small pieces of proof. There were hallway camera stills with dates that matched my calendar. There were screenshots of messages where I praised Fletcher for knowing my schedule. There was a note with a delivery charge that matched a day I had claimed to work late. I laughed too loudly and called the pile a misunderstanding. I said he was reading patterns into kindness. I said people like him always turn love into rules. He asked once more for boundaries in our home. I felt cornered and reached for the line that had won me rooms before. I said he should be pleased that Fletcher respected his time by coming while he worked. The joke sounded sharp in my mouth. I saw his face change from hurt to stillness. He thanked Fletcher for leaving and opened the door. The apartment went quiet in a way that felt final. I texted Sophia that Gabriel had tried to make me feel small. I told Patricia that he was threatening to cut me off from friends. I told myself he would cool down and that I had simply defended my rights. When I went to the kitchen for water, I noticed a small device on the shelf beside the fruit bowl. A red dot glowed once and stopped. Later, in the bedroom, I saw another on the dresser. I picked it up and realized it recorded sound. My stomach turned. I told myself it was illegal and would not matter. I also knew I had given enough away without it. Gabriel spent the evening making lists. He put mail in labeled piles and slid a card from Miguel's firm into a folder. He emailed the building manager about guest activity and copied himself on a new account I did not recognize. He set our joint card to alerts I had never seen before. He wrote down pickup times for Rosa and included make, model, and plate number. It looked like project work. I told myself it was theater. At midnight, I tried to reach Fletcher. He said distance was safest for him and that I should handle my home first. The chat went grey. I stared at the wall and thought about the line I had thrown like a dart. I had meant it to wound and pass. It had stuck. In the morning, Gabriel left with a backpack and a calm face. He messaged a list of tasks for the children's routine even though we had none. The message felt like proof that he planned to remove me from the space that carried those tasks. I stood alone in the doorway and finally understood that the joke I used as armor had become one more exhibit in a file I could not see yet. Miguel's office smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. I sat across from him with Rosa while Gabriel spoke in a calm voice I had not heard before. He laid out folders and a small drive. He described dates, entries, and messages. Miguel nodded and asked short questions. I watched them build a wall with my own days. I learned the pieces one by one. The building camera showed Fletcher at our door on lunch hours and late afternoons. The card statements matched coffee runs and food deliveries on those same days. A neighbor had provided a short note about a guitar case in our hall. My own post filled gaps I thought were empty. The red light on the little recorder had caught my joke about Fletcher respecting Gabriel's schedule. The audio sounded clear. I felt my mouth go dry. Gabriel had met a financial advisor before the restaurant scene. He had opened a separate account and moved auto-pays tied only to his name. He had set alerts for the joint card and capped it. He had checked the lease and found that only his name sat on it. He had asked management about guest policy and notice rules. He had done all of this without shouting. He had done all of it while I told myself he was passive. When he came home that night, he did not argue. He handed me a packet. It listed a 30-day move-out and offered a storage plan. It included a proposed division of shared items and a request to end our domestic partnership. It also named a civil claim for harm and costs. The words were not loud. They were heavy. I said he was cruel. He kept his eyes on the page and said he would follow the process. I tried to run to my usual corners. I told Patricia that Gabriel was trying to erase me from my own life. She rushed over with anger in her voice and told him he was heartless. He opened a folder and showed her timestamps, logs, and printed chats. She stopped talking. She stared at the dates and asked me if they were true. I said context mattered. The word sounded weak. Rosa made tea and set it down. She said paper kept people safe when feelings did not. Miguel spoke about steps and service. I felt like a person watching workers move a house I still lived in. I messaged Fletcher for help. He sent a short line about keeping distance. Then he blocked me. I stared at the blank circle where his face had been and understood what kind of friend I had kept. Gabriel scheduled the locksmith with management and a police standby. He sent me the window to collect personal items and listed what would be boxed. He copied Miguel on each message. He spoke only through emails now. I told myself he was hiding behind lawyers. The truth was simpler. He did not want to fight. He wanted me gone by the book. At the end of the week, a courier returned with 2 envelopes. One carried the formal notice to leave the apartment. The other carried the civil claim with exhibits. I held both and felt the weight of my own laugh pressed into them. The next morning, my lawyer forwarded a link labeled Supplemental Video Evidence. The timestamps matched afternoons when I had sworn I was at the office. I clicked once and saw the hallway. Then I saw myself. Court looked smaller than I expected. A clerk checked names. Miguel spoke for Gabriel and placed a neat binder on the table. My lawyer asked me to sit still and answer only when asked. The judge read without hurry. The file contained building logs, hallway clips, bank alerts tied to coffee runs, my messages with Fletcher, and the small audio where I joked that visits during work showed respect for Gabriel's time. The judge asked about the lease, the alerts, and the notice I had been given. Miguel answered with dates. My lawyer said I loved Gabriel once and had meant no harm. The judge said, intention did not undo pattern. Orders came like steps I could not refuse. Exclusive occupancy went to Gabriel. I had to vacate by a specific date, with a short window to collect personal items under supervision. Communication would go through email or counsel only. The joint card received a cap. Devices and accounts were to be preserved. The civil claim for costs advanced. Fees would be set later. The court noted that my joke had confirmed awareness, which weighed against me. I felt everything tilt and still told myself he could have chosen mercy. Rosa's hand stayed folded in her lap. She thanked the clerk afterward and asked for a copy. Patricia tried to argue that love should count more than logs. The judge reminded her that the case was about housing and proof, not feelings. Sophia stood at the back and did not meet my eyes. I understood she had nothing left to say. The locksmith met us that afternoon. Security carried a clipboard. My boxes sat in the lobby with an inventory sheet, clothes, toiletries, desk items, photos. Gabriel signed a receipt and kept his distance. He checked each line as I lifted a box. He did not gloat. He did not soften. He stayed exact. I told myself this performance made him smaller. It did not. It made him finished. I tried to call Fletcher while the elevator doors closed. His number went to nothing. The chat thread showed a blank icon. It felt like a wall where a door had been. I told myself he was scared of court and would come back when things were quiet. The thought sounded thin even in my own head. At the unit door, I reached for the keypad out of habit. The new code worked for Gabriel and not for me. Security reminded me of the order and the time limit. I moved through rooms that looked cleaner than I remembered. My frame photo was already wrapped. My drawer was empty. The bed was made in a way that showed it did not wait for me. I carried the last box to the hall and signed a line that said property returned. Outside, Rosa spoke to the officer about exchange points for future mail. Miguel sent a follow-up email to my attorney with the final list and the next court date for fees. Patricia asked where I would go. I said I would figure it out. She pressed her lips together and held the elevator door. Sophia texted later that she hoped I would rest. I read it twice and put the phone away. Back on the sidewalk, I looked up at the window of the apartment I had once called ours. The blinds were even. The light was steady. The lock did what the order told it to do. I told myself the response was too much for a joke. The paper said otherwise. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching? Ching, 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 ching.